I'm Teresa Lloyd. I'm a consultant to the non-profit sector with a particular focus on cultural and arts organisations. I also have been and am a trustee in various arts organisations. I've written a book on cultural giving and why people give, and as well as advising organisations on strategic planning and governance, and particularly major donor development, I advise philanthropists on developing strategies for their philanthropy.
I'm John Nichols. I'm Managing Partner of Arts Quarter, now euphemistically called the UK's leading cultural think tank. I have about 25 years experience of working in the arts and not-for-profit sector, mostly in fundraising, marketing, board development and wider organisational development.
I'm Christopher Goodhart. I'm the Managing Director of the Arts and Cultural Division of Blackbaud, the leading organisation working with not-for-profit organisations across the world, providing software and solutions to help them to raise more money. I've been involved in the arts sector for the last 13-14 years, and I am also a trustee of a couple of arts organisations and chair an arts development board. And just in terms of fundraising capacity and best practice, and my perception is that there are huge differences in terms of what happens within what can be done by the best organisations and what's being done by some other organisations, so that even basic things like getting your thank you letters out and responding to that seems to be lacking very often. And is that something that you're coming across particularly?
Well, certainly, we were talking about it earlier, and it's sort of very simple things matter. I mean, having people's names spelled correctly, saying thank you very promptly. Some very interesting research, and this done in the States, because not enough examples here. This is something that trustees can do. If somebody makes a gift, if the next day, certainly within 48 hours, they get a letter from a trustee, and if it's a big enough gift, the chairman, which says, "Dear so-and-so, I understand we've just given us X thousand, 100 or whatever, depending on the size of the organisation. This is fantastic news. Of course, the development office, the development director, whoever it is, will be in touch with all the appropriate administrative acknowledgement and so forth. But I wanted you to know how thrilled we are, and this made such a fantastic difference to the organisation." And the indications are that the next gift, when a board member says thank you like that within a very short time, is 37% higher. Now it costs absolutely nothing. You could actually supply a trustee with a stamped envelope, for goodness sake. And yet, when I talk to organisations, it's surely it would be very easy to implement this. Some people don't deserve to raise money.
Just from a practical point of view, we just finished working with an organisation where we found an awful lot of that, where there wasn't the simplest of acknowledgement processes being undertaken, and they have some very high-level trustees who are very keen to help but don't know how to help. And one of the things we had to do at the outset was just to say to the fundraiser, who admittedly didn't have a huge amount of experience and had found themselves landed in the job rather by accident rather than by fate, and it was setting them up in such a way so that they spoke pretty much on a day-to-day basis of the PAs of their trustees. Indeed. Those relationships are potentially the most important and most valuable ones that any fundraiser can have.
I think that's right. When I was at Save the Children, that's exactly what
you
I did.
know
very friendly with everybody's PAs.
Those PAs do your job for you, and courting them and having a good, productive relationship with them can be so critical.
And that's you're talking about the trustees as opposed to the high net worth individuals who they might be approaching.
And
both directions.
Where you have a high quality relationship with a high net worth individual, it may well be that they have a PA of their own, and getting that person engaged in your organisation and indeed thanking them for what they do for you in facilitating your relationship is critical.
And I think one of the things that, I don't know if we've had time to touch on this, but obviously we have been talking about organisations who by implication could have the resources to invest if they allocated. It's a question of how you allocate such. We all have scarce resources. I think one of the challenges that perhaps needs to be addressed that I come across, and I'm sure you do, is it's a sort of metropolitan focus that somehow it's all right for London and Greater London, but those of us who are not in London have much greater problems. We could never raise money up here. I think this needs to be challenged head on. It may need more investment and so on, but there is no question that in other parts of the country it is possible to raise money. Perhaps it needs some lateral different approaches, as we were.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible, and I think one of the challenges that I find in arts organisations is they're very unclear about the fact that we are a charity. We rely on our customers, our donors, to give us money, otherwise we won't survive, and they don't get that message across very well.
Absolutely right.
And they don't do simple things like saying, please, on every ticket you buy from us, add a donation on. Please, and I'm involved with an arts organisation in South London, which is in a deprived area of South London, where you wouldn't expect to get very many donations. They've been doing this now for the last few months, and they're getting in. For them, it's still only hundreds of pounds a month, but it's building, and and it works so easily.
And in fact, that some years ago, Richard Radcliffe did some, who's a legacy expert, did some research about legacies, and this is a plug you may wish to exercise, but this is covered in my book on cultural giving. He found very interestingly, I mean, it was fascinating, that many arts organisations, particularly those who sell tickets, so performing arts particularly, but not only, that he had various focus groups and so forth, that their audience members and their supporters, if you like, in the broader sense, had no idea that they were a charity, had no idea that they could leave them a legacy, just like, say, the children of the RNLI or whatever. And I think in terms of missed opportunities and bridging the funding gap, which is one of the things that we're talking about, legacy marketing is a massive, massive failure, I would say, in the arts sector. With obviously, in the broader cultural sector, the National Trust and so on, and the Art Fund,
we did some research work on that earlier this year, which we picked up in the last research project, and I think in general terms, I think only about 10% of those organisations who responded actually said that they actively market themselves as legacy recipients.
And one of the reasons I found is that it's long term. It's this constant,
that.
Oh my gosh, but if we invest money now we mightn't see any for 5-10 years. And it's always put off. It's always put off from us.
I just want to go back to that regional point that you've made. It's a really interesting one, because I think there are an awful lot of organisations outside of London who have a tendency, this is a generalisation I know, have a tendency to say we cannot raise as much money as those organisations in London. And they look at a very conventional model. They look at that combination of corporate gifts, trusts and foundations, and individuals in the terms of grants, sponsorship and donations. There are indeed, as we've already agreed, a wealth of opportunities out there in terms of legacy giving, in terms of gifts in kind, in terms of different kinds of corporate relationships that are specific to those regions, that have the potential to allow organisations outside of London to create very different dynamic fundraising models that could be quite different from the conventional model which is prevalent possibly in London and the South East. And I think there is an opportunity for someone, whether it's within the public sector or the private sector, to support those organisations outside of London to create those new models of philanthropy which will allow those organisations to thrive.
I think that's right, and also I think, I mean, we do have to recognise that for some organisations and some, a small arts festival is always going to find it a different kind of challenge than an organisation that would like to see itself as being there in perpetuity, such as an orchestra. We haven't touched on, because we don't quite know what's going to happen, as was said at the beginning about the white paper and endowments and so on and so forth. But for a few organisations, and this perhaps links to legacies, creating a long-term endowment to sustain, if you like, fill the funding gap, to provide a buffer against the volatility of the marketplace and allow greater risk, I think may be there may be an opportunity, but it's absolutely not for everyone. I think there are two other points. One is that I think it's back to this silo mentality, but it's a different kind of silo. I mean, there's the silo of not learning from other charities in other sectors, but it's about alliances. That there are in a world where in the social welfare field and so forth, people are creating alliances, not mergers, but there's far closer working together. I think there are opportunities in the arts, and also to look outside the sector, to make alliances with universities, for example. I mean, arts, to create a shared arts centre type facility or approach or whatever. All that kind of thinking, which isn't happening, and this is part of the desperate focus on the short term. So we're not going to think about legacies because we won't get money this year. We're not going to think about, and it's saying I haven't got time, and this is demonstrating, I think, a lack of a business-like approach. Because it's not that they have to be, as it were, have only business values, but actually thinking strategically. And too many organisations are just not thinking strategically.
And there's an area within that, which is that organisations who see their funding stopped or reduced by Arts Council or DCMS, there's lots of other government money around, or European money around, which people can be looking at, whether it's in education or health or food. There's a whole bunch of funds out there which people can certainly find access to if they think strategically about what they might be doing, because it will help them deliver their mission.
But that is, it's back to investment. It's back to this my opera company example. I haven't got time to think about.
I mean, I empathise with arts organisations in terms of them saying they don't have the time, and it's understandable that in most organisations that culture has grown up over a number of years for all kinds of reasons, but. One of the things we try to do is get organisations to think in a very different kind of way. Yeah. Why are you saying you don't have time? What are you doing that doesn't enable you to do this? What can you stop doing or move off your list of priorities and place it somewhere else temporarily to allow you to do the fundamental things that are going to enable you to move your organisation forward?
Absolutely, and linked to that is and where could you find the resources or expertise to do what you need to do.
At trustee level, in terms of your fundraising relationships, alliances.
Encapsulating
what is it that we actually need.
And that importantly, which you just said, which is, I mean, we have, internally here, we have 5 strategies, and the 5th strategy is stop doing everything else. Because if you really focus on what you're doing, you'll do it much better.
And human nature is such that it's very difficult to stop doing everything else, and it requires organisations to take a leap of faith, and for someone at a very senior level, chief exec, at trustee level, wherever, to say, these are the things we are no longer going to do so we can focus on our future.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
What about the whole issue of donor acquisition? It seems to me that, I mean, for small arts organisations, they sit there and they scratch their head and they say, we don't know what to do. We need to run a campaign. We don't know even how to approach local organisations to get any kind of corporate things, and we certainly don't know what to do about going out to find money from individuals. So you encourage them to look at their database and to trawl that and see how many millionaires they've got. And they're always surprised that there aren't millionaires sitting in their database that they never thought of. But then, having done that, they're then worried about, well, I don't know quite how to approach them. What's your advice in terms of how they can move on from that in terms of...
I mean, we do quite a lot of wealth screening for organisations and help them go through that process of understanding who they have and the power of research and understanding, building up a full portfolio of information on each of the prospects that they have. Having said that, there are an awful lot of organisations who get to that point. And it goes back to that point I made earlier about being good at the one-to-many relationships and not good at the one-to-one. They get to a point where they cannot take that leap of faith in terms of making that approach. And ultimately, they forget that the person who's going to be on the receiving end of that approach is a human being. If they're on their database already, if they've come to see something, there is already a relationship there. There is a common point of understanding in terms of them, the person at the receiving end of that, knowing a little bit about that organisation and indeed having an interest in it. And
I think that's the crucial thing. That
they are human beings and want
to
be treated as human beings.
Presumably,
thanked,
a passion for the, or at least a major interest in the art form. and it's a huge opportunity.
But they need to be cultivated. The danger for organisations, they think, oh, we've identified X as a millionaire, we're right now asking for some money, as opposed to going down the best practice route of encouraging them and bringing them in and
I think
getting them to understand.
What is interesting, and this is a fact at the moment, it's not necessarily good news, but I'm getting a lot of feedback, not only in the arts sector, in other sectors, this is for really major donors, that the kinds of gift, and from, as it were, relatively warm prospects, not a completely cold call, so to speak, that might have taken 18 months or at the most 2 years to bring to fruition, I mean a really major gift, is now taking 3 or 4 years. I mean, that it's taking a long time. And so it's back to understanding about exactly cultivation, understanding about nurturing relationships, whom people will want to meet, and investment. It is about investment.
Most importantly, the investment issue, but moreover, understanding that there are no quick fixes to this.
And that's something that we all discussed when we were talking with the Arts Council, is this impression that you can fix things very quickly. There are no quick fixes. It's a long-term game, and it takes time to work it through.